June 8, 1944. Saint-Léger, Normandy. Elevation, 42 meters. The morning fog hangs thick over the bocage, heavy enough to swallow shapes and dampen even the sharpest metallic echoes. Inside, a Panther OSF. On of 2. SS Panzer Regiment 12, Unteroffizier. Karl Voss leans his head against the armored wall, feeling the subtle, confident hum of the Maybach V-12 beneath him, the heartbeat of a predator waiting for the moment to strike. Then, through the murk, another sound slips in, higher pitched, lighter, plural, not one engine, not two, several, all American. Voss chuckles into the intercom. Shermans. Again. From the turret, SS Oberscharführer Ahneistorf Friedrich Hallmann, Inast Notes, answers with a dismissive growl of amusement. They never learn. One hit, and they light up. That was the doctrine German tankers grew up on. The Sherman is weak. The Sherman is flammable. The Sherman is prey. A tear in the fog reveals 3 silhouettes creeping down a narrow hedgerow lane, high profile, round turret, short barrel, textbook Shermans. Hallmann ranges them at 700 meters, ready to fire the moment they expose their flank. But just as he steadies his breathing, the earth begins to tremble. A soft vibration at first, then a rolling rumble, then a full-bodied quake that shivers the hedgerows like an approaching storm. Not 3 tanks, not 5, a Makanmiquis column. Vaigidri. The fog peels away, and the shapes multiply, M4A1s, M4A3s, and among them the long-barreled shadows of fireflies. Embedded like hidden blades. This is the Prafual, 441st Tank Battalion, advancing in dispersed formations perfected during months of training in the English countryside. Hallmann's smile fades. Voss's voice cracks slightly. How many of them? No one answers. The ground is answering for them. And suddenly, beneath the steel and doctrine they have lived by, something shifts. Because this sheer volume is not what their instructors at Grafenwöhr or Bad Tolz ever taught them to expect. Back then, the message was simple and intoxicating. The Panther is the apex predator. Its Kamastya Kamuke 42 L70 gun could punch through a Sherman from 1,500 meters. Its sloped front armor was nearly immune to the Sherman's 75 mm M3 rounds. Shermans burned so easily they earned a nickname. Tommy Kosher. Tommy Cookers. German tank schools insisted 1 Panther equals 5 Shermans. And behind these boasts hid 2 fatal blind spots. They believed superior engineering could always compensate for inferior numbers. They believed American industry could never sustain armored warfare. By early 1944, U.S. factories were rolling out 2,000 Shermans each month. Germany managed around 300 Panthers, many without spare parts. But German commanders still clung to their arrogance. "We will destroy them faster than they can bring them," von Rundstedt declared. He was wrong. Across the ocean, in the dry heat of a California training ground, Corporal Aaron Feldman, gunner of M4A3. Lucky 11 tightens a strap on a spare track link. He tucks a creased photo of his brother, killed by a Panzer IV at Kasserine, into his uniform. He knows the Sherman is not the best tank on paper. He knows it loses duels against Panthers head-on. But he also knows something the Germans do not. "We don't fight as one tank," he tells his loader. "We fight as an army. Every Sherman has a radio. Artillery responds within minutes. P-47 Thunderbolts orbit the battlefield. Engineers carve passages through hedgerows. Recovery crews pull damaged tanks back to frontline depots. And those depots, equipped like mobile factories, return most Shermans to combat in just under 48 hours. Detroit keeps the assembly lines roaring through the night. The German tank crews cannot comprehend this machine of machines. On June 6th, the Allies land. On June 7th, more than 600 tanks and 3,000 vehicles are ashore. On June 8th, tank crews report Sherman hulls they knocked out in the morning reappearing in the afternoon. Germany had never fought an enemy who came back faster than they could be killed. And now, in the cramped heat of Hallmann's turret outside Saint-Léger, as the fog lifts and the field begins to fill with American steel, the ideology of German superiority fractures. These Shermans are not jokes. They are not fragile. They are not victims waiting to burn. They move with coordination. They move with confidence. They move in numbers Germany cannot replace. Voss watches another wave of silhouettes emerge, spreading out, securing flanks, maneuvering with purpose. And he finally speaks the words that mark the first crack in the German illusion. Herr Hallmann, this isn't what they told us. The moment the fog fully lifts over Saint-Léger, the battlefield reveals itself like a stage suddenly flooded with light. 24 Shermans advance in a staggered formation, each tank keeping just enough spacing to prevent a single Panther round from devastating the entire line. On a dumber, their engines thrum in unison, not as individual machines, but as limbs of a coordinated body. Hallmann steadies his breathing. Loader, AP, gunner, on the lead Sherman. Inside the Panther's turret, Voss can feel the tension rising even through the steel casing. This should have been routine, one Panther firing from concealment against targets, unaware of its presence. Instead, the American tanks disperse with practiced discipline, slipping into firing positions with a confidence that irritates Hallmann more than it frightens him. He squeezes the trigger. The Panther's 75mm roars. The shell spears through the first Sherman's glacis plate, erupting in a blinding orange pillar. Flames jet skyward. The turret pops open as crewmen scramble out, rolling desperately across the dirt. See? Hallmann mutters. They burn. They always burn. But even as he speaks, the next Shermans press forward faster, not slower. One maneuvers around the burning wreck, another swings left, and a third reverses behind cover to call in coordinates. Voss realizes what the Americans are doing before Hallmann does. They're marking us, he whispers. Before the words finish leaving his mouth, the sky cracks open. A pair of P-47 Thunderbolts scream overhead. Republic P-47D-22 Res. From the Fokker C-362nd Fighter Group. Flying close air support sorties that have already become a nightmare for German armor. Their underside stores glint in the weak morning light. Hallmann snaps. Down! Get the turret down! But the Thunderbolts are not attacking yet. They're confirming the position. Seconds later, they circle to the west, preparing a strafing run. German doctrine had drilled for tank versus tank engagements, not for a battlefield where the enemy tankers could summon air power as easily as calling a taxi. Hallmann curses. Driver, reverse. Back. The Panther lurches, tearing through the hedgerow, just as the first salvo from a Sherman Firefly sings past their turret. The 17-pounder blast shears bark from a tree and slams into the earth. Fireflies were rare in Normandy, only about one per troop, Yet their presence turned every engagement into a duel the Germans could not ignore. The Panther crew realizes something deeply unsettling. The Americans are not charging blindly. They are coordinating armor, artillery, and air support into a single, coiled strike. Across the field, Corporal Aaron Feldman, in Lucky 11, watches smoke rise from the Sherman Hallman destroyed. It makes his chest tighten, but not with fear. Determination hardens his focus. "They've got a Panther on that ridge," he tells his commander. "If the Thunderbolts push them out, we flank them left." His commander nods and radios the battalion net. "Fireflies, pin that cat down. 2nd and 3rd platoon, on me. Keep dispersion. Don't clump." Feldman's loader rams an armor-piercing round into the chamber. "You think they know we've got a Firefly lined on them?" Feldman smirks. "Oh, they'll know in a minute." Hallman rotates the turret, searching for the Firefly, but every silhouette looks identical through the mist and smoke. That is the Firefly's curse, and its deadly gift. Only the long, distinctive barrel gives it away, and the Americans keep those barrels hidden until the moment they strike. "Where is it?" Hallman snaps. "Find the long gun. Find it." Then it happens. A crack like the sky splitting open. The Firefly's 17-pounder round slams into a tree inches from the Panther's right track, shredding wood into high-velocity shrapnel. Another shot follows, closer this time. Hallman's voice tightens, no longer dismissive. "They're bracketing us. They know exactly where we are." Suddenly, Voss sees it, the Firefly, tucked between two hedgerows, angled perfectly to catch the Panther's turret ring. 3 o'clock. Firing position. Before Hallman can traverse, the field flashes white. Not a Firefly. Not artillery. Hawks. The Thunderbolts have returned. They're 8. 50 caliber Browning M2s unleash a storm of tracers that rip across the hedgerow. The Panther is not penetrated, but every strike rattles the hull like a giant fist smashing down from the sky. The driver shouts that his periscope has shattered. The air inside the tank fills with the stench of scorched paint. Hallman knows they cannot stay. "Driver, floor it. Back to secondary cover." As the Panther crashes through the hedgerow, Feldman watches it retreat. He exhales, not victorious, but measured. "Worst one cat pushed back." His commander answers, "And 20 of us still here." For Feldman, this is the first real proof that the numbers, coordination, and combined arms doctrine they trained for were more than theory. Against a Panther in a perfect ambush position, one Sherman was killed. But the rest kept coming. The rest kept fighting. The rest kept pressing the line forward. For Hallman, the realization is different and darker. If one Panther cannot stop a battalion, if air power hunts them the moment they fire, if the enemy can lose tanks in the morning and replace them by noon, then Germany's belief in technical superiority may not be enough to survive Normandy. The clash at Saint-Léger is only the beginning. Over the next days, as the Normandy hedgerows become a labyrinth of ambush lanes, kill zones, and improvised strong points, the Panther crews begin to see a pattern, one that unsettles them more than any single engagement could. Every time a Sherman dies, another seems to appear. Every time a Panther scores a perfect shot, the Americans answer not with retreat, but with reinforcement. By June 11th, along the winding approaches to Carrington, the 2nd Armored Division brings its full weight into the hedgerows. Their advance is methodical, almost mechanical. Engineers move first, blasting rhino gaps through the bocage with welded prongs. Shermans surge through these openings like water through breached levees, each tank communicating by radio, coordinating movements with a fluidity German crews find unnerving. Inside his Panther, Hallman stares through his optics at an American column maneuvering with eerie precision. This is not how their tanks fought in Africa, he mutters. And he is right. In Tunisia and Sicily, the Shermans had attacked in clumps, hasty, disorganized, feeding themselves into German guns. But in Normandy, the Americans fight like a must network and not isolated vehicles. Platoons remain in constant communication. Artillery observers ride in half tracks just behind the tanks. Infantry move beside the Shermans, protecting them from Panzerfaust ambushes. When Panthers fire, their muzzle blasts give away their positions, and within minutes, American mortars hammer the coordinates. It is as if the battlefield has tilted in favor of the force that can coordinate. Canis, not just strike hardest. On June 12th, outside Hillard, Feldman and Lucky 11 join an assault on a German defensive line anchored by several Panthers and a handful of Stuggy 3 assault guns dug into hull-down positions. The Panthers begin the fight with brutal efficiency. In less than 3 minutes, 2 Shermans are hit, one turret blown clean off by a KWK-42 round, the other swallowed in flames. Feldman watches the burning wrecks with clenched teeth. The loader whispers, "We can't face them head-on." But Feldman's commander replies calmly, "No one said we would." A smoke barrage from the 14th Field Artillery Battalion floods the German line, white sheets rolling like ocean waves across the ridge. Under cover of that smoke, infantry creep forward, marking German strong points with colored panels. Another platoon swings wide to the left. Then Feldman hears the unmistakable blast of a Firefly 17-pounder. One Panther stops moving. Another attempts to pivot, but exposes its thinner side armor. A second Firefly takes the shot, piercing the Panther's flank in a brilliant flash. Hallman hears the explosions and knows the ridge is compromised. "Driver, pull back. We can't redirect in this smoke." But as his Panther reverses, he catches sight of the most infuriating spectacle imaginable. American Shermans that had been disabled the day before, tanks his own battalion had hit, now back in action, patched, repainted, and rolling forward. He grips the periscope tighter. How? How do they return so quickly? The answer lies in the sprawling machine shops now operating behind the beachhead. Corps Ordnance. S. 1st Army Maintenance Battalions. Leistam and portable repair depots run by hundreds of mechanics working in shifts around the clock. They cannibalize wrecks, weld new plates, swap engines, and send Shermans back to combat faster than German factories can manufacture Panther transmissions. To Hallman, it feels like fighting an army with an infinite life pool. To Feldman, it feels like momentum, tangible, growing, accelerating. By June 15th, Feldman's tank company advances toward Meijuvos Pont Ebert. Yes, where the 6th Panzer Regiment makes its desperate stand. The Germans attempt textbook tactics, hull-down ambushes, interlocking fields of fire, reverse-slope defenses. But every success they score evaporates under the relentless American tempo. A Panther knocks out a Sherman? Artillery lands within minutes. A Panther relocates? Thunderbolts hunt it. A Panther runs low on fuel. There is no resupply. The Reich has nothing left to give. Meanwhile, the Shermans refill their ranks with fresh tanks, fresh crews, and fresh supplies. The exhaustion is visible even in German war diaries. Where we kill one, 3 return. We destroy a platoon. The next morning, a new one appears. They repair in hours what takes us months to build. Hallman begins to understand what frightens him most. This is not a duel of tanks. This is a duel of, systems. And the American system is expanding faster than Germany can resist. In each battle, the Panther remains dangerous, lethal, feared. But the Shermans keep learning, improving, adapting. They swarm flanks. They synchronize with infantry. They call the skies down upon German armor at will. And slowly, inevitably, the Germans feel the momentum shift against them. For the first time, Hallman admits to himself, quietly, almost reluctantly, this is a different kind of war. But at late June 1944, the hedgerow stalemate begins to crack, not because the Shermans become stronger, but because the system behind them evolves. Now, faster than German armor can perceive or counter. What breaks the balance of power is not a new tank at all. It is a new way of fighting, and its arrival is quiet, almost invisible at first. American officers call it the Combined Arms Package. German tankers call it something else entirely. Wolke aus Stahl, the cloud of steel. The transformation begins with a technological curveball that German intelligence fails to anticipate: the widespread introduction of the SCR-508 and SCR-610 radio network, allowing seamless communication between armor, artillery, engineers, reconnaissance, and aircraft. Unlike German armored units, where only command tanks had reliable two-way radio, every Sherman crew can speak, relay, request, and coordinate. In real time, it turns the battlefield into a living organism. Inside Lucky 11, Feldman hears it happening. Orders, coordinates, warnings, flowing across the net in a constant pulse. Firefly engaging Panther. Grid 32A. Artillery ready, smokescreen inbound. Thunderbolts requesting confirm flare. Engineers opening Rhino Gap east of the orchard. Infantry pinned, Shermans pivot to support. It feels less like war and more like a conductor raising a baton. Meanwhile, German tank units, low on fuel, low on radios, low on replacement parts, are trapped in a 1942 doctrine facing a 1944 machine. For Hallman, the turning point comes on June 18th, just south of Pont Hebert, when his Panther unit receives fragmented reports. Shermans are breaking through the hedgerows without exposing themselves to ambush. How? He demands. Bocage favors the defender. Panthers dominate from concealment. The American tanks should be bleeding by the dozens. Instead, scouts report something else, something that seems impossible. Their tanks are pushing through the hedges, a breathless infantry officer says. Through the hedges themselves? Hallman scoffs. Nonsense. A Sherman can't punch through Bocage. But then he sees it with his own eyes. A Sherman bursts through a thick Normandy hedge as if propelled by an unseen force, its bow reinforced with welded steel tusks. Prongs fashioned in the field by inventive sergeants using scrap from beach obstacles. These are the new Rhino Shermans, created by Sergeant Curtis G. Coolin and rapidly adopted across the 2nd Armored Division. The Panther crews are speechless. Where German tanks must maneuver to find openings, the Rhino Shermans make their own. smashing through natural walls to outflank prepared positions. Ambush angles dissolve. Defensive fire lanes collapse. Paths that should have taken engineers hours now take seconds. It is the kind of battlefield innovation that rewrites an entire campaign. Hallman feels the shift instantly. "They're everywhere," he says, staring at Shermans bursting through hedgerows that should have guaranteed German protection. They aren't supposed to move like this. And then another blow lands. Not from the front, but from the sky. Above the tree line, the dull roar of radial engines grows louder. Feldman looks upward with a grim smile. He knows that sound now. Everyone in Normandy knows it. P-47, Thunderbolts, the Jugs, the tank killers. This time they are not scouting. This time they are hunting, with newly tested, improved ground-to-air radio protocols. The American armor can now feed live target updates to the fighter bombers circling overhead. The 362nd Fighter Group swoops in with terrifying precision, delivering your 500-pound bombs, and strafing runs aligned to Sherman fire missions. A Panther exposed while pivoting? Marked. A Stoogie trying to shift position? Marked. A resupply truck sneaking up a back road? Marked. Hallman's world becomes a slaughterhouse. He orders his driver to reverse, but the hedgerow walls trap them like a steel coffin. Every time they fire, dust erupts from the muzzle brake, revealing their position. Seconds later, thunderbolts descend like birds of prey. The battlefield is no longer a fight between machines. It is a battlefield where the side with the better network, the better communication, the better adaptability dictates the terms of survival. What kind of army fights like this? Voss mutters inside the Panther. They fight as one. Hallman answers quietly. And we fight as pieces. The realization hits him harder than any shell. Even the vaunted Panther, king of long-range duels, cannot exert its dominance when the enemy refuses to give it a fair fight. Shermans swarm from multiple angles. Infantry smother the flanks. Artillery seals escape routes. And air power hammers anything that dares to pull back. And worse, every American innovation arrives with frightening speed. Within days, Rhino kits appear on dozens of tanks. Within weeks, entire battalions operate like mobile combined arms hammers. Within hours of losing a tank, the Americans simply roll out another. For Feldman, the climax feels like the campaign finally snapping into place. For Hallman, it feels like the ground has shifted underneath the entire concept of German armored warfare. For the first time, the Panther crew sees the truth clearly. They are not being defeated by the Sherman. They are being defeated by the Ranks system that carries the Sherman forward. A system that Germany, exhausted and isolated, cannot hope to match. By early July 1944, the German front in Normandy is no longer a line. It is a series of fractures held together by exhausted men and dwindling fuel. The Panther battalions that once terrified Allied armor now operate in shattered platoons, lacking the spare parts and fuel reserves needed to move as a cohesive force. And for many of them, the breaking point arrives not in fire and steel, but in silence. On July 9th, south of the Veer River, Hallman's Panther finally gives out. Not from a direct hit, not from a catastrophic kill, but from something far more humiliating. The transmission seizes. The Panther lurches once, twice, then stops altogether. Smoke trickles out from the engine vents. The driver tries to coax life back into the crippled machine, but Panther transmissions, complex, delicate, prone to overheating, fail far more often than their designers will admit. Hallman knows what this means. They cannot run. They cannot maneuver. They cannot survive. He orders the crew to abandon the tank and flee east toward the tree line. Voss hesitates, touching the steel hull as if leaving a mortally wounded animal. The Panther had been their pride. Now it is a tomb waiting to be sealed. They cross a ditch, sprinting toward a hedgerow, but footsteps close in behind them. American infantry, paratroopers of the Machinon, 101st Airborne, pushing toward Saint-André-de-l'Épine, emerge with rifles raised. "Drop your weapons. Hands high." Hallman freezes. Voss lowers his pistol. The rest of the crew follow. It is over. Hours later, they find themselves in a makeshift POW cage near Le Camp, Asta, surrounded by rows of German soldiers, infantry, gunners, tank crews, faces hollowed by shock and disbelief. Some stare blankly at the ground. Others sit in tense silence, replaying battles they no longer understand. An American interpreter approaches Hallman and Voss. He speaks fluent German, with a calmness that feels almost disarming. "We need to ask a few questions," he says. "Your unit numbers. How many Panthers left? Your supply situation." Hallman's reply is instinctive, rehearsed. "We are not authorized to comment." But Voss cannot hold it in. What is the American secret? He blurts out, surprising even himself. "How do you keep bringing tanks back? How can you replace losses so fast?" The interpreter trades glances with another officer, then answers with a shrug. "It's not a secret. It's logistics. It's industry. It's planning." He points toward the distant coastline, where cranes unload crates, engines, spare armor plates, and entire replacement tanks onto the expanding Allied beachhead. "Over 2 million tons of supplies have landed since June," he continues. "Your army fights alone. Ours fights with everything: air, armor, artillery, transport, engineers, radios, repair depots. A Sherman isn't one tank. A Sherman is a process." Hallman feels the words like cold needles. A process, not a machine, not a duel, not even a battlefield. A process. Voss stares at his boots, the shame and clarity mixing into a bitter fog. In the days that follow, the German POW camp becomes a strange classroom. Tankers from shattered units compare notes, and a disturbing picture begins to crystallize. Dozens of them had destroyed Shermans multiple times, only to face the same tank later, patched and returned. Others report being driven out of positions not by American gunnery skill, but by swarms of tanks attacking from 3 angles at once. Some speak of thunderbolts appearing within minutes of any Panther firing. A few whisper that the Americans have endless fuel, endless food, endless ammunition. Across the camp, the illusion of German superiority crumbles like wet sand. One evening, a young German tanker asks Hallman quietly, "Were we lied to?" Hallman doesn't answer, not because he refuses, but because, for the first time, he truly doesn't know. Later, Feldman passes by the POW enclosure as his unit moves south toward St. Lo. He locks eyes with Hallman for a brief second, not with hatred, but with a sobering recognition. They are both tankers. They both buried friends. They both risked everything inside steel coffins. But Feldman walks with momentum. Hallman sits with stillness. America's war machine is accelerating. Germany's is draining away. Behind Feldman, fresh Shermans arrive to reinforce the advance. Mechanics tune engines. Crews refill ammunition. Radios crackle. The front shifts forward like a tide that cannot be held back. Behind Hallman, His Panther sits abandoned, stripped, and blackened. Another corpse of a doctrine that failed to evolve. The war is not over, but the outcome is becoming clear. When the Americans break through at Saint-Lô, July 18th, 1944, the dam finally bursts. Operation Cobra tears a hole straight through the German lines, and armored divisions pour into the gap with a momentum the Wehrmacht can no longer counter. Sherman after Sherman floods the battlefield, not as individual machines, but as nodes of a vast, synchronized system. By August, the German 7th Army is collapsing toward the Fard Falaise pocket Oakwan, the Savitar Ovara, clawing desperately for escape routes already cut off by American tanks, Canadian armor, and RAF fighter bombers. The Panther, once the feared apex predator of Europe, finds itself hunted, smothered, surrounded, outpaced. Hallman, now marching deeper into captivity at a POW camp in England, hears the guards talking about American production numbers. Another 1,000 Sherman tanks shipped this month. More on the way. Factories still accelerating. It sounds impossible. It sounds inhuman. It sounds like the very thing the German war machine had promised it would be. Unstoppable. But Germany has run out of oil, run out of steel, run out of time, and most of all, run out of illusions. Meanwhile, Feldman, riding atop Lucky 11 through the liberated streets of Avranches, senses the turning tide in the quiet way townspeople wave from shattered windows. His Sherman still bears scars, track repairs, welded plates, repainted hull numbers, but it continues forward, symbolic of the American approach. Fix it, refuel it, return it. During a brief halt, Feldman reads a report from Ordnance Command. Of all Shermans disabled in Normandy, over 65% were repaired and returned to the front. He looks across a field littered with burned-out Panthers. Majestic machines, formidable machines, machines built to win duels that no longer decided wars. A strange, heavy respect falls over him. The Panther had been a masterpiece. But masterpieces do not win industrial wars. Systems do. Coalitions do. Coordination does. Across the channel, German POWs are interviewed by British analysts. Many echo the same sentiment. We thought Sherman crews were inferior. We thought American tanks were weak. We thought industry did not matter. We were wrong. One officer from the 2nd Panzer Division says something that would later appear in Allied intelligence summaries. The Americans fight as if every part of their army is connected to every other part. We fought with tanks. They fought with a method. As the war drags toward its conclusion in 1945, the lessons become unavoidable. American armored doctrine, flawed at the start of the conflict, has matured into a relentless, adaptive engine. The Sherman, humble in its design, becomes legendary not for outgunning its enemies, but for outlasting them, outnumbering them, and outmaneuvering them within a larger strategic framework. Then, in post-war interviews, German generals admit something they never would have confessed during the fighting. It was not the Sherman we feared. It was how many came. It was how fast they came. It was how they were supported. Karl Voss, years later in a British POW camp, writes a final reflection in his diary. We mocked the Sherman. We called it a coffin. But it was not one Sherman that defeated us. Marist, it was the idea behind it. An idea we never understood until it was too late. That idea of mobility over perfection, logistics over elegance, coordination over isolation. would shape armored warfare for the next half-century. And Feldman, standing atop Lucky 11 as American armor rolls across France, feels the weight of something larger than victory. He feels the weight of a new kind of warfare, born not from the barrel of a single tank, but from the interconnected heartbeat of an entire nation in motion. A nation whose tanks came not as wolves hunting alone, but as a muck swarm, persistent, repaired, reinforced, inevitable. A nation whose crews did not fear the Panthers because they did not fight Panthers. They fought an army built on doctrine, pride, and scarcity. And they defeated it with systems, speed, and scale. Sehen, the laughter German crews once had for the Sherman, died in the hedgerows of Normandy. What replaced it was something far more enduring: respect, fear, and the realization that the future of war belonged not to the perfect machine, but to the machine that could always return. Andalkeino.